Welcome, everybody, to the Value Add Strategy Podcast. I'm joined today by Brett Swarts, who runs a very interesting strategy around Deferred Sales Trust, DSTs, not to be confused with Delaware Statutory Trust. We're excited to get into that. But first off, Brett, thank you so much for being with us today.
I'm grateful to be here, Matthew. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So where are you based?
So I'm originally from California. I always say don't hold it against me, but we now live in St. Augustine, Jacksonville area. Corporate office is in St. Augustine, but we live in Jacksonville, Florida.
Nice. And you're from California originally?
Yes, sir. Been there my whole life. Played some college hoops down in San Diego and Northern California. I went to high school in a place called Rockland High School near Sacramento. Built houses with my parents in the Bay Area kind of prior to that and throughout high school. So real estate background by blood, you would say, with my dad and my mom building homes and rentals from a young age. Then Marcus and Millichap was kind of the next phase of growth within the real estate world with multifamily investment brokerage, 1031 exchanges. That was kind of the 2006 where I started there and quickly learned some hard lessons during the 08 crash, which kind of led us to where we're kind of today, learning ways to exit well and be smart with timing with different markets and different seasons of real estate, whether you should be in debt or be in equity or capital gains tax and how it all kind of tax flow, cash flow connects.
Yeah. Interesting. So how did you, a guy from California, basketball player, worked with your family in building homes, how did you make the transition over to this unique DST strategy, which is kind of the focal point of what you do? Is that right?
100%. I think I remember the moment where I was in Marcus and Milton. It was around 2008, and it was the bottom of the barrel for a lot of agents at that point. We were talking to one of my mentors in the office, and he says, Brett, the moment you start adding value to the client who you're calling and you're trying to help is the moment you stop wasting their time. And it hit me like a ton of bricks, right? And basically said, well, so how do I help not waste their time? He said, you know more about their property or their problem, and you be a resource and a solution and a guide for them. And then they'll want to take your call and they'll want to meet with you, and it's not hard. And so that means you need to obviously do the research, know the comps, know how to increase their rents, know how to decrease their insurance, whatever it is, get them a better rate get them a lender's going to give them a better rate. But also it was capital gains tax. What I quickly found out is the 1031 exchange, everyone loves a 1031 exchange buyer, but they don't like being that 1031 exchange buyer. And it creates what we call the shotgun wedding, where you're trying to get engaged and married within 45 days.
Yeah.
180 days. And I just saw the pain of people losing half or all of their wealth. And in particular, a client named Steve, who had built up a $50 million portfolio of multifamily properties. He had two sons, lived on the hill. And I remember going to his driveway. It was a big, long, circular driveway. It was one of the first I had seen, and with all the cars lined up. And he was doing really well until he wasn't. And he lost everything in the crash. And I remember sitting down with him before that and saying, hey, Steve, we think you should probably sell. The market seems pretty hot right now, and your assets, here's the problem. I have massive capital gains tax. I've done multiple 1031s. To replace equal-rated debt in a short period of time, I'm going to be hard-pressed. Plus, values are so high. I feel trapped between tax and debt in the timing of the market. And we walked out of that meeting not having a plan for him or a solution. And the 1031 wasn't a good fit for him. And this is before we knew about Deferred Sales Trust, what we're going to talk about today. And fast forward, he lost everything, lost his marriage, and the hardest part was he didn't have time with his two sons. And see, growing up, my parents were divorced at a young age, actually, about 6 years old. And I split time between both family, my dad's, who had the wealth, and my mom who didn't have the wealth. And that created a interesting dynamic of where I wanted wealth to be in my life for impact and not for working against families. And so dad didn't pay child support, but dad did a lot of really good things. And so we learned quickly that, hey, to make an impact with wealth, you got to have family, mission, vision, values. You also have to have a team to help you execute, in ways that are going to unlock freedom and impact. And so that's what we do now. We exist to unlock capital gains, to multiply freedom and impact. Starts with the entrepreneur, starts with a mindset and a practice of not just cash flow, but tax flow. And then it's combining it with what we think is probably one of the least known strategies. At least people know how to execute them. And so we basically went all in on this one particular strategy, although we're open to other ones too. And we certainly do some combinations with different fact patterns. But that's kind of how I got into this. The market crashed. I met the tax attorney CPA who created this 30 years ago. And I just sent him referrals. And then we started to do more deals. people started to say, wow, is this really real? Does this really work? And at first I was the prophet that wasn't accepted into his hometown. I was just the real estate commercial agent calling you, and you're like, you're not my CPA. Who are you? And they'd hang up on me. And eventually they'd say, well, if I could help you, would you at least meet a guy? And they would meet the guy, and the guy was the tax attorney, and they go, wow, this guy is really smart. Well, go close some deals, Brett, and then come back to me. And so I said, okay. And so eventually we went national, and podcast, best-selling book, and YouTube. That's what helped us to get really on the map, because it wasn't just in my hometown. It became a national. So I got clients all over the country, and we do business exits, real estate exits, Bitcoin. We first ever did it with Bitcoin. So that's kind of the journey. So I guess a lot of things led to it, but I'm grateful to be here.
That's amazing. Let's take a step back, and perhaps we could compare and contrast the pros and cons of this strategy to a 1031. What I'd like to ask you is, in my mind, I would ask you to correct me here. The way this deferred sales trust works is, let's use Steve as an example. And I'm sure you wish you knew about this strategy when you drove up that windy driveway to go meet Steve, because you probably could have helped change his life. Let's kind of unpack that for a minute. So in Steve's instance, he owns these apartment buildings through this deferred sales trust. Kind of direct me through what you would have done with him had you known about this strategy at that time. I think what I'm hearing is he would sell his buildings into this new trust with an installment note, and then there would be a trustee that he would go and sell it to a third party from there. Is that how this works?
You're basically there, right? We find the buyer for $50 million, just keep it real simple. Okay. Imagine he had $20 million of debt, right? So we find the buyer for full $50 million, either cash or with financing, but we're not going to finance that buyer. And Steve is going to sell the $50 million asset, but right before he sells it to that buyer, the trust is going to jump right in between. He's going to sell it to the trust.
Okay.
And the trust is going to sell it to the buyer. Debt's going to get paid off of the $20 million, let's say, and then Steve's going to get a $30 million promissory note from the trust, essentially. Okay. And they have two strategies, and we'll walk through kind of how they differ within the trust options. But that's the simple math, and then he'll just take that in installments, and the funds go to like a Charles Schwab or a bank, and then they can have a financial advisor, and they can go into real estate funds, passive, active, all that stuff. But it's just an installment sale with a trust. Now, there's a third-party trustee. That's our company. Okay, we're kind of like an IRA company. We're kind of like a 401k, or kind of like a 1031 qualified intermediary. We're kind of like a lot of those, but we're a third-party unrelated trustee. This trust, let's call it the Sacramento DST, in this scenario, 2009, right? We would have named it like something like that. That would only do business with Steve and his wife and his family. It doesn't do anyone other business, right? And so he has to approve of the investments, right? But the best part is he can still be an entrepreneur, but it's an installment sale, right? Now, there's a couple rules here. Installment sales for a married couple, it's $10 million per calendar year before there's an interest charge. So we would probably have structured it with a $10 million note on a 1.0, and then we would have done a 2.0 for the rest of the 20 million, which is eliminating the estate tax, which is important for him at this point, given where he would have been. And that's a little bit different for how it's paid back. He'll still pay tax as he receives it, but the general concept is third-party trust, sell it to the ultimate buyer, but the funds are now liquid. The debt is paid off, which is huge. And the best part is the timing. There's no timing restrictions. So he could have sat in money market account, a real estate debt. He could have waited, a couple years for that market to really hit the bottom and start buying all those houses at the courthouse steps, all tax deferred, and built a business within that world. And that's the light bulb moment for me, because it wasn't just the fact that you can do this, it was what could it unlock? And as entrepreneurs and real estate investors that we were at Marcus and Millichap and the clients we were serving, if we can make this thing kind of like a time machine, meaning diversifying when and how we go into real estate, that is really the holy grail, right? Because it takes about 3 years from the top to bottom. I think we're seeing this now too, with 2022 maybe being the top, maybe 2021, and 2025-ish, 3 to 4 years is the bottom. Maybe last year was the bottom, maybe this year's the bottom. Like it's right around that 3 to 4 year window. The same thing within real estate. In the 08 crash, it was about 2011-ish when it was kind of probably the bottom, maybe 12. But that's the point. How do we sell high and buy low?
So it's very, very interesting, kind of fascinating. And it's what's also interesting about it is how unknown this kind of concept is. Mm-hmm. I don't hear about this very much. And In fact, I've heard about it once and then I met you and now I'm learning about it more and I'm almost thinking about it for myself, perhaps some of our investors. But kind of let's go back to Steve's example because I still have some questions and perhaps
Sure.
the audience does too. So this $30 million drops into a trust. Your group is the trustee, as an example. You said it could be directed into a Charles Schwab account. He could wait for the trough in the real estate market. He could go buy more real estate. How, explain to me in that scenario, what's deferring the tax? I know that, is it the construct with the note that's deferring the tax, or why is the tax deferred in that particular situation?
Yeah, because the nature of the ownership for Steve went from ownership equity to a
the
creditor
trust.
or a bank, all right?
Okay.
So he's loaning it to the trust, and the trust owes him back the money. So it's shifting from an owner to a lender. It's the easiest way to think about it.
I gotcha.
So it's an installment sale. So most of us know seller carry back, right?
Sure.
And so if he had carried paper for the buyer, let's imagine the buyer put no money down, and let's just make it a $10 million deal to keep it simple, okay? And he just said, I'll carry 100%, right?
Yep.
Well, how much does Steve owe in year one when he takes nothing? Zero, right? Year two, it's zero, right? The problem with traditional installment sales, they're typically 2 to 3, 4 years, and there's no prepayment clause, and they're around 5 to 6%, which is great for the buyer. The buyer doesn't have to get the loan or deal with the banks. The only reason sellers typically do it is because they don't want a 1031, but it's not great for them either because if, we'll call the buyer, George, if George defaults, Steve has to take the asset back, which he doesn't want to do necessarily, right? That's the point of why he sold it. So we solve that traditional installment sale risk, but we use the concept that's been around for 100 years, which is 453 installment sale reporting. So in fact, what's kind of wild about this, when people say wow, how can this really work? I haven't heard about it. You've done installment sales, or you know about it, or your CPA knows. Yeah. In fact, we report it on the same form that your CPA would report if you did a regular installment sale. But
it seems so simple.
It is so simple.
Too simple.
Let me give you the 3 objections that people come up with, right? The first one is too good to be true. I don't know it's legal. Why haven't I heard about it? I've been in the industry forever. My CPA is so smart, and they may have kind of heard about it, but they've never done it. By the way, you're never going to get a CPA who's never done it or seen it done give you a rubber stamp right away. They just won't. There's no upside for them to say yes to something that they haven't had a client do and they haven't really looked at. And the reality is the CPA tax attorney who's my business partner, he becomes a part of your team. He doesn't replace your CPA, just becomes a part of your team for this specialized sale. Now, I played basketball in college. I signed my scholarship. Within 2 weeks, I blow my ACL out, okay? So my dream is coming true. I blow my ACL. It's the worst, one of the worst days of my life. I go to the doctor. The doctor's like, Brett, your ACL's fine. And I'm like, this is great. He did my little knee check. You don't need an MRI. But I'm like, doctor, I really need an MRI. I think I really want to be peace of mind. He's like, you're wasting your time, but go ahead, go get the MRI. I go down there 2 weeks later. You're like, yeah, you're completely ruptured. You need ACL surgery, right? So the point is your CPA is probably like that general practitioner, most of them, right? Or they know 1031s, they know how to report something, but they're not a specialist in this particular part of the tax code. So the legal thing real fast, just to keep it real simple, thousands of transactions at this point, 30-year track record just about 35 no change audits. So thousands and thousands of closes, routinely about $1 billion of assets sold using this every single year. So the legal, we've proven the legal. Yeah, we've proven the legal. But you're right. If you're going to want to use your general practitioner, just, and you need him to be that blessing, we want to bring him on the call, get him as comfortable as we can, but realize that you might have outgrown your current general practitioner. So that's the legal part. Lifetime audit defense built in. Any questions on that legal part? And then we can go to the control, trustee, and the fees.
No, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. I do have a question, and maybe you're going to get to this, and if you are, I apologize. But my question is, thank you for that explanation with Section 453, because that explains how that's deferring the tax. Makes a lot of sense. Once it goes into this bucket within the trust and you can direct it, you're the trustee through Capital Gains Tax Solutions. Are there any restrictions in what that bucket, if you will, can invest in? It sounds like it can invest in public equities. It sounds like it could buy direct real estate. It sounds like it could buy LP interests in real estate. What can it do?
Yeah, no restrictions for asset class or asset type. So you're right, it can go into stocks, it can go into Bitcoin, it can go into real estate, it can go into private debt funds, private real estate funds, really any asset of any kind. Couple restrictions: you can't go back into your primary home. Same reason a 1031 can't go into a primary home. That's not an investment deemed for the tax code. That's a taxable event, right? Although if you needed some money for a primary home or whatever, we can schedule a payment, pay tax on that amount, and do whatever you want with the money. You also can't borrow against it. A lot of people want to say put the 10 million, you borrow against it, which is a rule that the IRS basically states that you can't, they can't pledge what isn't taxed. They don't want it to be pledged, and that they don't want to take that risk. And so they say you can't do that. That's deemed constructive receipt. They want their tax on that. So, however, you can go into a lending business. So you could be like, I'm in the business of lending to other third parties, fair market value, not your friends or family. So we just want to keep, friends and family, if they are going to be in the business, that they're working for fair wages or fair management fees. Same thing with yourself. Like you can go back into your own fund. That's fine. That's a business purpose. As long as you're not inflating the amount that the trust is investing into to pay you a higher amount that would have been taxed. So that's kind of the guardrails. But honestly, it's great because clients routinely build properties with it, routinely start business with it, and diversify into real estate funds. Most of our clients are business and real estate owners, which means they built most of their wealth in business or real estate, which means they want to be in business and real estate investments long-term. In the past, when we would approach folks who are making all of their wealth in business and real estate, they thought that the only option was to go into the stock market with these. And that's kind of how it was kind of marketed by some of my competitors in the past. And one of our unique advantages is we're really good at real estate and have great networks and connections with folks like yourself, Matt. And we look at it like real estate is actually the primary. The alternative is the stock market, right? If you're working with the right sponsors and the right groups. I think that's been proven out even too by Tony Robbins' book recently. I think it's like 13 or 14% on average over any period of time versus like a 9.4 for the stock market. So taking that approach of like real estate and entrepreneurship and figuring out ways to still diversify, of course, bringing a financial advisor, but it's really the team. It's not just the strategy. It's like, who is the team to help execute this? Which leads into, I'll just cover these two objections real fast because people probably have them, I know, every single time. What are some of the downsides? One of the downsides you could say is you have to give up some control, right? The whole nature of selling something for a promissory note is giving up some control. To who? To our trustee company. That's part of it. Now, the reality is the funds don't move without your approval or your signature, and you're not going to be invested into anything you wouldn't have already invested in yourself. We can kind of do a thesis before anything shows up. But I will have to approve, or our company will have to approve of the investments. If you had unilateral control to do whatever you want with it, that's the definition of ownership. Therefore, that's taxable.
Validate the whole concept.
So we have to follow within the guardrails there. So you have to give up some control, but you can partner with the trust and do a JV LLC after closing, and you can be the managing member running that capital in that deal, as long as it's like a real estate fund, a business venture. It's not like a day trading kind of thing because that's too much control again. And the same concept would be true. Hey, I have this real estate fund that I want to go into. This guy's name is Matthew. This is what he does. Great. Let me talk with Matthew. What does he have? We go through it together. You like it. We like it. Great connection. Here's the amount that you want to allocate towards that. We'd have them do a risk tolerance questionnaire as well to kind of get a sense for their level of risk. We also want to dial in their income needs, right? We want to look at their estate planning needs for eliminating estate tax. It's not a one size fits all for everybody. We have to kind of dial it in. And that's part of why it is a little less known, because it's more complex. So that trustee part is something that you have to get comfortable with. The last one is fees. Fees are about 1.5% gross sales price fee to the tax attorney, my business partner, at closing on anything around $1 million. Anything above is about 1.25%. So, and then the trustee fee annual recurring is based upon the net proceeds in the trust. Generally, let's just use $1 million as an example. With the financial advisor, it's about 1.5% to 2% on a recurring basis. Without a financial advisor, if it was just sitting in securities, it would be around like 85 basis points. If you go into real estate funds or different things, it jumps back up to about 1.5% to 2%. But our big number here is looking at 20, 30, 40, 50% of the proceeds is the math on this. On every exit, the first part of the ROI is stating, what state are you in? New York, New Jersey, Illinois, Minnesota, tax of Oregon. These are the highest tax states. If you're in any of these states, it's probably at least 30, 40, 50% of the proceeds are going to be taxed with depreciation recapture. We really get clear on that number first. Number two, so let's say it was going to be 10 versus like 6. So now we got an extra 4 to work with. So the first ROI is the full 10 goes in. Then we write the note, let's say at 8 or 9%. Let's call it 8%. Well, you can do an income tax deferral play on this as well. So let's play this out with a client who's in California who moved to Nevada. They established residency in Nevada, and as they take the payments from the trust, it's Nevada based because they established residency. So guess the income tax dropped because it's a zero tax in Nevada. So that's the type of mindset there. Plus, he didn't have to take the income. So we have a lot of ultra high net worth clients that don't necessarily need or want the income, and their biggest tax is income tax. That's part of why they're buying so much real estate, to get the depreciation cost seg to offset. So what we're talking about here is tax flow mindset. We're saying, how do we offset every dollar of cash flow or delay it inside of a trust where it's just building up in the trust? And you might say, well, wasn't the trust paying tax? Well, typically not, because the trust can expense what it owes to you on paper. Therefore, the trust operates at a paper loss. And then
they could depreciate their assets within the trust as well if they go buy more real estate.
Yes, and it typically doesn't need that. That's why we would partner with you and you establish a new basis in an LLC. So watch this. Let's say 10 million is in the trust, and let's see if we can use an example of you selling some stock or some Bitcoin. And as you know, stock and Bitcoin has no depreciation opportunity. But let's say you have a $10 million gain in Bitcoin or stock, you sell it into the trust, and then you partner with that trust. Let's say you put $3 million into an LLC. That LLC buys a $6 million apartment complex. Well, guess what? That LLC has a new basis. Okay. Now that $6 million is the new, 20% of that will be land value. Let's just say that's depreciable after that. Now we set it up at typically an 80-20, but check it out. 80%, Matt, if it was your deal, would go to you. 20% goes to the trust. The trust puts up all of the money. Trust asks for a preferred return. So we have it dialed in to maximize your tax flow depreciation. Now remember, you sold a $10 million Bitcoin or worth of Bitcoin or stock, or let's imagine it was a 27.5-year apartment complex that was fully depreciated, right? No depreciation. And now you've established a brand new depreciation schedule, right? I mean, so this keeps going on. So I just want to encourage people as you listen to this, you got to figure out how to make whatever you're going to be doing an investment and not an expense. And that's where the team comes in to keep peeling away the onion to say, hey, how does it apply to Matt? How does it apply to the high net worth individual who's sitting there? I'll give you one other example, because this is probably the most powerful, and honestly, is the estate tax elimination. So right now it's 30 million married, 15 million single, which is the highest it's been in I think probably decades, right? Who knows? It could go back lower if a new administration gets in, but the baby boomer 124 trillion is transferring in the next 10 or so years. A lot of them have estate tax problems, okay? So what can they do? They typically get charity, life insurance, or gifting, which is not wrong with that, but they run out of kids, they run out of time. Life insurance is very expensive and only covers the Band-Aid of it. And charity is good, but people don't necessarily want to give everything away to charity. So for our structure, we have a 2.0 version. We can set up an irrevocable trust, and upon a sale, let's make it a $130 million apartment complex in New York. They own it free and clear, fully depreciated, and let's say, man, it's all of it's inside the taxable, say it's a married couple. Well, we're going to sell that $130 million deal tomorrow into the irrevocable trust, make the kids the beneficiaries. We've just eliminated the estate tax, which is basically a $40 million savings. 130 minus 30 equals 100. 40% of 100 equals 40 million. And one day and one sale without any life insurance, gifting, or charity required. And that's important because a lot of people are not setting up or have the time or the expertise to season certain other trusts. Now, some do, and again, some do it partially, but our unique strategy is we can do that all within a 30-day sale. And people love that. And then that's that. I'll pause there. I'm saying a lot. I keep going, but I want to make sure you answer any questions, Matt.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's interesting. I was going to ask you about the estate tax and the exemption. So back to your $130 million example, I just want to make sure everybody followed that. So you got a $130 million building. It's effectively got no basis, let's say, and you sell it into this new trust for $130 million, right? Walk me through with a $30 million exemption, how you're able to get the entire asset in without paying any tax. I want to make sure I fully understand it. I want to make sure our listeners and your potential clients could understand this.
Yes.
It's a big deal.
Yeah, it's huge. It's massive, right? And this is estate tax elimination. And then let's also start with if they don't do anything. Because most people think, I just won't do anything. I'll just get the stepped up basis, 1031 exchange until I die, swap until you drop, and then I'm tax free, or my kids are tax free. No. Your kids are capital gains tax free.
Not estate
but,
tax.
but not estate death tax free, which is like, oh gosh. And so if you've ever seen the show Yellowstone, Kevin Costner is talking with Beth, his daughter. Beth is like, Dad, you got to sell the $1 billion land in Montana. And he's like, but Beth, I'm never selling the land. It's for the family first. He goes, but Dad, if you die or if they kill you, the death tax is going to kick in anyways, the estate tax, and you're going to have to, we're going to lose the land anyways. We don't have $400 million basically. He pauses and says, Beth, I'm never selling the land. It's like, wow, you got to realize that what's at stake here. Like, you got to plan before you die. So the answer is, in Kevin Costner's scenario, we would find that $1 billion buyer, right, who's ready to go with the $1 billion. And you got the seller who's willing and able to sell. The trust comes right in between the sale. Kevin Costner's irrevocable trust, okay? Kevin Costner sells it to this particular, it's a particular irrevocable trust. And we're using something outside of traditional 453 installment sale reporting, okay? It's more of an annuity type of thing, okay? And although it doesn't have to be invested into annuities, it just uses more annuity rules. You're going to sell it to the trust, and the trust is simultaneously going to sell it to the $1 billion buyer. Because the trust bought and sold for the same $1 billion, the trust has no gain, okay? Sellers are kind of like creditors. They're owed back a certain percentage based upon their life expectancy, based upon IRS interest rates, okay? And they will take partial interest and partial principal over their lifetime. Let's make them 75 years old, okay? And let's say their life expectancy is 80. Let's say they actually live just to 80, okay? Well, they'll take some payments over 5 years, and they will pay tax over those 5 years. But what's ever remaining of that $1 billion that went in originally, the children can inherit it if they're the heirs on the estate, state tax and capital gains tax free. Okay, so we've eliminated the need for the 1031 step up, and we've eliminated the estate tax. Now, during their lifetime, again, that married couple, Kevin Costner and his wife, whatever, in this scenario, they're paying some cap gains tax. So it's not perfect, right? You're gonna pay some tax during that lifetime. But let's say they only lived a year. Well, they only took a year. Let's say they're 90, right? So they only end up living a year, and we did this 1 year prior. It's the same outcome, right? Estate tax and cap gains tax elimination. So this is so big and so massive that we encourage people to do the planning, check us out, obviously all the things, but outside of not doing the planning and not taking action, the consequences are like the Miami Dolphins. You heard that story, right? Where the family did not do any proper planning. The heir died, and they had to get rid of the entire NFL team. They couldn't afford the estate tax. Yeah.
Wow. Well, this is really interesting stuff. I know we're up against time. I would love to continue this conversation. I know several folks that I think would be very interested in your services, that I'd like to buy their property, and they're kind of stuck, like Steve was stuck. And this is a new kind of option that I'm really excited about offering these folks. And you and I could talk about this offline. Before I let you go, I want to let you know the purpose of our podcast is to inspire entrepreneurs to live their dream. And, I appreciate you coming on. You're an entrepreneur. You built an incredible business, an incredible strategy. The final question I have for you, Brett, is what advice would you give your former self, or somebody who's just starting out, whether they want to get into a tax mitigation strategy, whether they want to, launch a Bitcoin miner, whatever they want to do philosophically, what would you tell that person?
Yeah, so get crystal clear on the unique gift that God's given you and the calling on your life. I believe everyone's been given a unique calling and work for their life and a purpose. And the closer and the sooner you can get to that, the sooner you can fulfill your mission and your destiny here on this world. So get crystal clear on that, and then get a mentor or mentors to help you refine that on your personal life mission statement, your family mission, vision, values, and then just get going on that. Ruthlessly eliminate the distraction away from anything that takes you from that. I wish I would have learned about this earlier in my life, and that's the one big piece of advice that I would encourage every entrepreneur to practice, no matter what stage you're in, to always go back to that.
Incredible advice. Great advice, no matter what stage you're in, by the way. I'll take that as advice, and I could use it today. I appreciate you coming on, my friend. This was really fun, very interesting stuff, very actionable. Looking forward to talking to you offline. For those that want to learn more about what it is that you do and have a need for your services, what's the best way to reach out to you?
Yeah, you can go to Capital Gains Tax Solutions. And we also have a book called Building a Capital Gains Tax Exit Plan with Kevin Harrington from Shark Tank in the book and a number of other folks as well. It's kind of my journey to my purpose for what we're doing here at Capital Gains Tax Solutions. But yeah, Capital Gains Tax Solutions. We can also go to brettswarts.com for all the social media stuff and all the connections there too.
Brett Swarts, I appreciate you coming on. I'm looking forward to continuing this discussion. Thanks again.
Thanks.
All right.